really one thing I look for is a self-starter. I want to see evidence that someone is not just kind of looking at the screen and saying, okay, I have to do this, I go and do this, I have to do this, I go and do this. I'm looking for the kind of person that says either A, we shouldn't be doing this and I think we should do XYZ because of ABC, or they say, yeah, we could do this, but we can also take it to the next level. And I thought this was a neat extension that we could do. Like I want that kind of person that pushes beyond the status quo a little bit. Sure. So I'm a little bit biased. Coming from the engineering world, that's a good entry to sustainability. It certainly doesn't have to be an entry to sustainability, but what I like about it is it inculcates a very sort of systematic way of thinking and approaching problems. And it tends to give people a good quantitative grounding to be able to attack problems and say, okay, we're going to sort things into what's material and what's not. So that's one useful starting point for sustainability, but certainly doesn't need to be the only one. We just hired for an analyst position in the fall, and we did not select an engineer. So it can be any background as long as you have the project experience. And really one thing I look for is a self-starter. I want to see evidence that someone is not just kind of looking at the screen and saying, okay, I have to do this, I go and do this, I have to do this, I go and do this. I'm looking for the kind of person that says either A, we shouldn't be doing this and I think we should do XYZ because of ABC, or they say, yeah, we could do this, but we can also take it to the next level. And I thought this was a neat extension that we could do. I want that kind of person that pushes beyond the status quo a little bit. And I want that's always one of my interview questions. I ask, like, give me an example of you going beyond or above and beyond, because it was just, your nature, or you were really interested in the project or what have you. As far as practical skills, I really don't I don't require or put a huge emphasis on any particular master's program or anything like that. I do put an emphasis on project experience, but in particular, as far as training, lately there have been an explosion in training opportunities for young professionals in the sustainability field. So you can get training on virtually anything now, from the DEI side of things to GHG emissions quantification and assurance and verification, all across the gamut. So it's really, to me, I would recommend folks read 5 sustainability reports, look at the GRI content index, and figure out, whoa, that topic looks interesting to me. If whatever page you're flipping to first, maybe consider getting some training specifically in that area. And it's a very common motif in sustainability for someone to have a particular technical expertise in one area and a good general exposure in many areas. So for me, that area is GHG accounting and decarbonization. But I have exposure across environmental compliance and water and the social impact side. So anyway, I'll leave it there so we can hear from the other speakers, but there are a few ideas there. Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely a challenge in the market now because ESG is such a new concept. Let's say it's been around sustainability, environmental compliance for a while, but they have changed names. So there's definitely a challenge with people having certifications or masters at this moment. And there's a gap between what the market is asking. It's asking for 8 years plus experience, 5 years plus experience, when that's not what young professionals have at this moment. So what we're seeing a lot is just transferable skills. So in my case, for instance, I did have a master's in sustainability when I first joined, but I did not have robust experience, what we call experience, right? Because I think that's something I also have an issue with. I'm a believer that you can create your own job in sustainability, and that's actually how I get started. At some moment, I realized here in Montreal, there's not job opportunities for me to have this title that I so much look for. Let me just start taking action where I'm at. So that's how in UPS 5 years ago, I said, I'm just going to start a sustainability committee. I'm going to reach out to my chief sustainability officer. Oh, she didn't answer. Let me reach out to my director of corporate sustainability. Let me pitch an idea. I want to do my graduation project with them. And that's how I did my first TCFD report was for them. And so on. So I myself got into there by navigating networks, and what Jeff was mentioning, just being pretty much a self-started and just letting my passion drive these kind of initiatives. And those informal kind of experience were my most valuable asset when I was looking for a job. So when I started my interview process with consulting, I was able to leverage all this experience. And even my other job, when I first joined Delmar, where I was a sustainability officer, I used that as an opportunity to do my first stakeholder engagement exercise, my first materiality assessment. And I was very, very mindful of the experiences that I was getting to then be able to leverage. And nowadays in our practice, I think that's definitely an approach where we value people's experiences that are not a title per se. So a person that comes from, there's a lot of things happening in the sustainable finance world. There's a lot of ESG conversations at the investors level, asset management, private equity funds. So we might hire someone that is an internal private or a former private equity employee or pension fund employee that was this ESG kind of champion. So it comes with the subject matter expertise, and then you can learn the ESG kind of specifics on the job. And for that, we do provide, and I see a lot of companies providing training, education. Of course, our leadership team, it's this well-rounded team of experts that you can always go to. So our partners, our leaders, they have years experience, and that's something that you can always lean on. So I do see a lot of value for these kind of in-house experiences and not necessarily having the title, because you can always learn the specifics. So I think, to your point, Jeff, of giving people an advice, my advice has always been start wherever you're at. Don't wait to have that sustainability title, because then you'll stay waiting. If you work at a coffee place, you can be that person, that employee that wants to start the composting program. If you work at a marketing agency, you can be that first person looking to run sustainable events, and so on. So there's always a place. And I do think with the challenges that we have ahead, we do need more sustainability ambassadors in the different functions of our teams. And I think that's actually how I leverage a lot of my strategy when I was a sustainability officer. I started to just give accountability to others. And to your point, Jeff, you run and you leverage your people in the plant a lot. You can also leverage your finance teams to advocate for investors. So I do believe that we'll need a lot of ESG components in different careers.
Are the majority of people in your team engineers? Are they
Not at
anthropologists?
all.
Are they finance people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So definitely our assurance team, those that work on auditing non-financial numbers. So when you see a sustainability report, a lot of those numbers are audited by a third party. Some of these folks are accountants, but I say now some of them. We started to see recently, we're hiring non-accountants to do these kind of jobs, which is great, because these are not financial statements. These are non-financial numbers. So it could be audited by people that are not accountants. But in my team, on the other hand, we are the strategy group or advisory. None of us are accountants. I'm the only engineer. We have a person that is a biologist. We have a person that is a PhD on, I think, geology. Like, it's very diverse. There's no one background. We have a person coming from sustainable finance background. He has an MBA and a business administration kind of background. So it's very interesting, more and more, because the challenges of our clients are very robust and they need different perspectives. More and more you see different diversity of thinking. So in my team, I think there's only, in the advisory strategy group, there's only a handful of engineers, and the rest is a very diverse mix of backgrounds.
So it's been something that I feel has been ignored a lot in corporations, and it's a very new concept. And I've started reading, learning from different peers was mainly because of the racial reckoning that we've seen in Canada and America in 2020 and 2021. So the concept of climate justice is to say that BIPOC, which is known as Black, Indigenous, people of color are going to be disproportionately more affected by climate change because they're living in areas that are um, at a climate risk. So they're probably living in areas that are near toxic waste, more flood prone, more cyclones, more tsunami. And there is, within the climate justice, there is a much broader concept of environmental racism, is to say that a significant portion or population of the Black, Indigenous people of color are going to be affected the most because of being at poverty, living at below standards, living at, I'm at loss of words, but um, living in areas where many corporations could be dumping their toxic waste. So the reason why this hasn't been addressed is Jeff and Laura have spoken a little bit about the whole concept of decarbonization and every single country setting science-based targets in alignment with the Paris Agreement as well. But what's not taken into consideration is how would net zero impact Black, Indigenous people of color, and mainly Indigenous people, specifically in Canada. So if we are talking about phasing fossil fuels, moving towards renewable energy, investing in renewable energy, the reality still stands today that many Indigenous people in the northern part of Canada, Northwest Territories, are still relying on diesel generators. So when we are engaging with different stakeholders and talking about what do we really need to do as a company, as a community, as a country specifically, to move away from fossil fuels and invest more into clean technology, sustainable technology, we need to understand how does climate change impact the Indigenous community and what would it take if we phase out fossil fuels. And I think that's where my big frustration comes, is many companies are coming out with net zero targets, but within the net zero, they talk to the board, they talk to the investor community, they're talking to the suppliers, because there's a big portion of your scope 3 emissions. So we have our scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. So within the scope 3 emissions, they're looking to engage with suppliers. And every time I read a sustainability report, I'm thinking about, have they engaged Indigenous community as part of their scope 3 or as part of their net zero broader strategy? And I'm hoping, with everything, unfortunately, all this racial reckoning that we've seen in North America, that we see the investor community, the broader Canadian business community talking and engaging and listening rather than providing solutions to the Indigenous community, listening to them and saying, okay, how does climate change really impact your livelihood, impact your quality of water, quality of air? So I think that's where the concept of climate justice comes, and which I teach my students, is you cannot solve climate change without understanding equity, justice, and without understanding that how does climate change really impact the Black, Indigenous people of color.